Well, hello again. Welcome to Horror in Detail. Today we are going to share cryptids encounter stories. First story. This story was shared by you/North Coast 10. I think I encountered a Wendigo. My wife and I have been running the rat race for years, with a family, a house in the city, 2 dogs, a cat, the stereotypical American dream. But the city took its toll, the neighborhood got worse, the crime rose, and we found ourselves looking for a way out. Our opportunity came when I was offered a new job out of state. It was a great career move, but we didn't want to move to a new city just to have the same problems again. So we started looking around and found a great mountain community about an hour and a half from the job, and a great ranch-style house with a big back porch, windows everywhere, and a lot of property. The backyard has a big grassy area, and a creek that cuts the property in half, then acres of woods beyond. It's huge. The house is more than twice the size of our house in the city, it's all updated, and has no neighbors within a mile. It's a radical change from the life we lived in the city, but best of all, it was less than half of what we were paying for our old house. The house was a foreclosure, and when we asked the listing agent about it, she simply said the old family had abandoned the property. We really didn't think anything of it. The first 3 months were uneventful, with us settling into our new life, the kids getting used to the new school and new friends, and most of all, us getting used to the big house and property. But then the weather turned cold and things started to get weird on the property. It started with noises from the back property. Things we chalked up to being in the woods, then the motion lights around the house started going off randomly. Once again we just chalked it up to being in the woods. But last night, it all changed. Last night was the most terrifying night of my life. One of the dogs was at the back door whining and scratching. I assumed he needed to go to the bathroom, so I grabbed my flashlight and walked out the back door. Instantly something felt off. The dog bolted for the back property, growling and snarling. It was a cold night, about 30 degrees, but the dog plunged straight into the creek and out the other bank, running off into the woods in the back of the property. Flashlight bouncing, I ran after him, calling his name. I got to the creek and made my way across the makeshift bridge, trying desperately to follow him. I could hear the dog still growling and barking from somewhere up ahead, and I pushed further away from the safety of the house and deeper into the woods. That's when I heard it. A shriek like I've never heard before in my life. It was a mix of a moaning wail and metal on metal. It echoed through the trees and then froze me in my tracks. My dog bounded its way back to me and cowered down behind me. I turned around and could just make out the warm glow of the house behind me, and the cold dark ahead of me. I swung my flashlight around wildly looking for the source of the noise. And that's when I heard an even more terrifying noise. Out of the cold silence, my wife's voice floated all around me. "Babe," the voice called out. I whipped back around and could just barely make out the image of my wife, safely inside our house. The voice called out again. "Babe, I'm right here," came the voice from deeper into the woods. Then came another voice, just as clear as the other. It was my dad's voice. "Come out here," it called. I swung the flashlight around again and this time caught the briefest glint of light bouncing off of eyes. The creature was in my beam of light for barely a second, but it was tall, maybe 6 feet, and ashen white. It had long spindly fingers that grasped the trunk of a pine tree, and then it was gone. I turned back and ran towards the house. I ran headlong into the icy creek and stumbled. My dog ran past me, making it back to the yard and up to the porch. I dug my hands into the freezing, muddy bank and pulled myself out, not stopping to look back. When I reached the porch, I scrambled inside. My wife ran over to me, asking what had happened. I just shook my head. I'm not certain myself what happened. I had a growing sense of dread tonight as the sun began to fall. We kept the dogs inside, and I haven't dared to look out the back. But as I sit here typing, one by one, my motion lights in the backyard keep going on. Second story. Mother's calling. I spent the first few years of my life living in a small house at the back end of my grandmother's property. Mine is a large family, and it was not uncommon for the various aunts and uncles to stop in to pay a weekend visit or to spend the whole summer at Grammy and Grampy's, camping out in one of the many large bedrooms on the second or third floor of their giant Victorian house. Being the baby of the family, I always got trotted out to be shown off and then shooed off to play with the cousin nearest my age. More often than not, this would be Dickie. Dickie is only a few months older than me, but he's always looked years older. I think he grew his mustache at the tender age of 9. Dickie and I spent our summer together, roaming our family's acreage day in and day out. When we'd finally get home from church on Sunday, it was a race to see who could get changed into their blue jeans the fastest. It was usually Dickie. He'd always be waiting patiently for me by the giant willow tree that sat at the Y where my parents' driveway branched away from our grandmother's. Hand in hand, we'd run off to do those things that only children can do with such enthusiasm. We'd explore the ruts that Grampy's tractor left in the soft earth or play soldier in the tall grass by the woodpile. Sometimes we'd get too close to the woods at the edge of the property, and one of the adults would swoop down upon us and bring us inside for a snack or tell us to get ready for dinner. My 3-year-old mind wasn't really up to the task of putting 2 and 2 together, but years later I'd look back and realize that we were always being carefully watched over by the family and not let to wander too far afield. And this is the way it was for the whole summer. Endless days of sunshine and fun with my favorite cousin, safe and secure under the watchful eyes of my family. Until the day my older brother got hit by a car. I didn't see it, because Dickie and I were way off at the other end of the property, down by where the dark trail to the creek is. But the story goes that my older brother Gabe was riding his bike back and forth in front of the big house, and a drunk driver came from behind him and just kind of clipped him a little, sending him out of control and flying off the bike. He wasn't hurt very badly, just a lot of scrapes and bruises. But my mother's shriek was enough to bring the whole house out to the road, including my Uncle Danny, who was supposed to be watching me and Dickie that day. Being children, we were ever curious, and finding a path that we hadn't taken yet intrigued us. Also, being that it was the middle of summer, the dark shadows under the oaks were very inviting. And so it happened that my stalwart cousin and I wandered into the woods at the edge of the property, down the hill and to the creek. I remember the walk down the creek being very short. It was an easy downhill slope and hard-packed earth, as if many feet had trod it before me. Dickie led and I followed, down to the sound of fast-running water. We sat on this big flat rock immediately to the right of the end of the trail, contentedly plunking rocks into the water when I heard my mother call out our names. It was kind of a sing-song thing, my name first and then Dikey's. Startled, and knowing that we weren't supposed to be down in the woods, especially by the creek, I grabbed Dickie's hand and started running for the trail. Except that the trail wasn't there anymore. Now, I've been back to this place many, many times since that day. Granted, not till I was much older, but still, and I know exactly where we were sitting on that day. The trail is right there, in plain sight. I have no idea how we could have misplaced the trail, but we did. And so we were lost. My mother called out to us again. And this time she was echoed from across the creek. It wasn't a human voice. And no matter how many times I've tried to convince myself otherwise, it wasn't a mockingbird. It sounded mechanical. It was almost rusty, like the wind blowing through an old duct and moving a fan around. The way it hung on the vowels in my name, like it was savoring them, gently caress. I'm getting shivers remembering this poo-poo. It's actually more frightening now, when I can reflect on it. At the time, it just scared me. Now, however, especially considering that it only called to me and not my cousin, really don't want to know what we came across that day. I stopped dead in my tracks and stared back across the creek. There was nothing there. No animal that would have made a sound that seemed like my name. Nothing. I turned to Dickie and said, "Let's run." He took my hand and led me off the big rock, onto the sandy bank. We trudged along through the wet sand, making for the sound of my mother's voice. Every time she'd call out to me, whatever it was on the far bank would mimic her almost immediately in its horrible, grating voice. I dragged Dickie off the bank and into the woods. I have no idea what I was thinking running full tilt into the woods, just that I needed to get away from the water's edge. So there we were, two little kids, crashing through the woods for all we were worth, pushing through thickets and getting scratched to hell and back. I'm guessing that because it's easier to run downhill, we ended up back at the water. My mother called again, this time sounding farther away than she had been before. And this time, when the mimic came, it was on our shore. There was no doubting it. I slowly turned, afraid of what I'd see, feeling an undeniable sense of presence, that feeling of eyes boring into the back of my head. This time, there was something there. It wasn't until years later when I'd have the words to describe it, but it was a shimmering spot in the air. It was almost like a heat mirage, making the air dance. But it didn't stay in one spot. It moved, slowly but steadily, growing larger and larger as it came. As it approached, it left footprints in the wet sand. They looked like bird footprints, but writ large. There were 3 long toes that left deep holes at the end of the print, claws, and 1 short, hooked toe off the side, followed up with a back toe at the rear. Think of a peace sign with an extra line off the left and give it claws. As it came closer, I could feel kind of a hum somewhere deep in my head. I have no idea what this was. My mom started yelling for me again, sounding more and more frantic now. And for the first time, it occurred to me to answer her. I hollered at the top of my little voice and ran toward the sound of her. The loving thing mimicked me. But it didn't say, "Mommy." It crooned out my mother's name. At the time, I didn't know my mother's name. So the horror of that moment didn't hit till years later. I turned my back on the thing and dragged Dickie toward my mom's voice, screaming for her as loud as I could with this loving thing grating out her name behind us as we ran. Mom broke through the brush in front of me and gathered the 2 of us up in her arms. She turned and ran back into the woods and up the hill, got us into the house and sent my youngest uncle out to tell the men that we were found. Grampy and the cop, a family friend, actually, who came to take the report about my brother getting hit by the drunk, went down to the creek with guns drawn. They came back hours later and had a hushed conversation in the dining room. I don't know if they found anything. In fact, as soon as we were safely locked in Grammy's bedroom, we started playing with blocks as if nothing had happened. Sadly, that was the end of my summer of fun. Dickie and his parents went home the next day. I wasn't allowed to play outside anymore. We moved about 2 hours away at the end of the summer. It wasn't until years later when I watched Predator that I started to recall what happened that day. Of course, by that time, I knew better than to talk to my folks about it, so I called up Dickie and asked if he'd seen the movie Predator. He went silent for a few minutes. We talked about it for a little while. Neither of us could make any sense of what happened that day, but we both remembered it the same. I don't think what I saw at the creek that day was an alien headhunter sent to Earth to hunt humans for sport. I do know that it scared the hell out of me and my cousin. And I do know that I wasn't allowed near that creek until I was about 15, and even then, my folks got upset whenever I told them I was planning on hitting the creek. I've never encountered anything down there since. Third story. This story was shared by you/ZachBabyTV. Wendigo Spirit, Long Lost Journal of a Viking Explorer. Last year I was hiking with a buddy of mine in the woods in eastern Newfoundland. For those who don't know, it's in the far eastern part of Canada. We are both originally from the Vancouver and have been avid hikers and campers for many years, traveling to all parts of Canada and currently working on our visas to America actually. While we were on a 2-day hiking trip camping where we saw fit, we stumbled off path as we thought we saw a cave farther off into the distance. After about 3 to 4 minutes of walking off the dirt path into the woods, we approached it, and indeed it was a cave. Knowing that caves are super neat but also very dangerous for many reasons, we just looked around for a bit before deciding if we should check inside if it's clear or not, as it would make a good spot to have camp for the night. Caves are home to many animals ranging small to large, bears, wolves, to name a couple of the more dangerous animals to be exact. We eventually grabbed our flashlights from our backpacks and entered the cave entrance cautiously. The cave was pitch black, and once we had walked inside, noticing how deep it actually was. From the outside it looked like a 6 to 7 foot wide opening with about a 5-foot ceiling. But once you stepped inside, it had a good open space, I'd guess to be about 15 by 15, which was more than enough space for the two of us to set up camp and get a fire going for the night. In the back of the space was what looked like a small pathway of some sort. It was narrow and looked like the earth cracked it just enough for someone to walk through it. Where it led we had no clue, and I was not really wanting to find out at that moment. We were tired, looking to rest, and did not feel like venturing off into the uncharted cave deeper and risking falling or getting hurt or stuck, or God knows what else happens to people in caves. There was a faint water dripping noise down that dark pathway which echoed throughout the cave. Sounded spooky to me, but then again, maybe there's some fresh water nearby we can collect for tomorrow hike, I told my buddy. Once we set up our things, I told him I'd go check it out and see if I could find the source of the water, as I held out water containers in my now empty pack and my flashlight in my right hand. The pathway was twisted and narrow, and honestly it was just better that I went alone, plus I doubt my bud would have went with me anyways. He was tired as hell and was just ready to eat and go to sleep. I tucked and squeezed myself through with my pack and eventually found the source of the water after a minute or so walking deeper into the cave system. This cave kept going and going. I could see further ahead, but I found the source thankfully not too far in. There was a small stream that flowed down the rocky surface wall into a small puddle-like area, then disappearing into the rocks and earth. As I shunned my flashlight around, I happened to come across a pouch of some sort which was made of animal fur. I thought it was an animal at first and stood frozen in my tracks. I walked over to the fur ball and grabbed it. I realized the fur was just wrapped around something flat and hard in its center. As I looked, it seemed to have unraveled an old as hell looking leather book of some sort. I was really memorized about the find, but then realized how thirsty I was and took care of filling up our water containers first and bring this book and fur back with me back to our little campsite at the cave entrance. Once I got back, my friend had already gotten the fire going, which felt really nice as I sat down handing him his water. The night was on its way out with the sun starting to set. I told my friend about the book and let him take a look at it. He was always the history buff anyways. I just liked video games and hot chicks. He told me that this journal looked really old and is really surprised it in the shape that it's in. He pointed to the off shapes that were on the cover and on parts of the pages on the inside. They looked like runes, he mentioned. I didn't recall what runes were, and he told me that in fact that was the way of communication writing back in the Viking days. As he read, I mumbled to himself, "Dude, this is written in English, which is odd unless this person or Viking traveler was educated or had traveled more than most." He read on for a few minutes and told me to check it out as it mentioned this cave on one of the pages. He handed me the book and he laid back onto his mat and started to relax. I, on the other hand, was totally excited. Not only did I just find some ancient Viking journal in some cave in the middle of nowhere, but it was readable too. "This has to be worth some money," I said to him. He opened his eyes and just replied, "Dude, just read it, or go to sleep." I nirked at him and I laid my back up against the side cave wall and started to read the notes from inside this journal. "If you are finding this journal, that means I am dead. My name is Bjorn Erling and the year is 1004 AD. I do not know the exact date of these entries as I have been stuck here in this cave for some time now. Our ship had arrived to the shores of this new-found land several weeks prior to these entries. There was 40 of us in total and have built a small village right off the shore past the wood line. We have an altercation with the natives of this land as they do not speak any language that I have heard before. They attacked our fort on the second week we are here. Several of our members have died and most of theirs too in the process. We can't seem to communicate properly with them and they keep attacking in the middle of the night and we are trying our best to lessen our defenses. We have built walls around our village, but they always seem to find a way inside, picking us off one by one. They are not big people, quite small in fact, but there are many and our next ship is not due here for another week or more. I was out hunting with a brother of mine in these woods. We went deeper than we have been as our people are hungry and we needed meat. The sun was dim and the colors above were quite pleasant to see when it was visible from all the trees overhead. We started hearing noises echoing around us in the woods, not knowing what they were. We followed them. No sense at turning back, these sounds would have already startled off any catch we may have been tracking. As we continued deeper and deeper into the woods, the noises and snapping sounds became louder. We had no idea what was in store for us at the time, but we had to investigate. During our proustite, that when we both heard a familiar sounding voice speaking to us. It sounded like one of our other Viking brothers back at the village that had gone missing during one of the attacks for the natives. "Bjorn! Help me, They have me trapped here and I cannot escape. My brother screamed, by Odin, where are you? Silence. The voices didn't reply. I gripped my sword handle on my waist and my brother held his bow with a firm grip. Do you think that was really Kenjo? I don't know, I replied, but we need to find out either way. It def sounded like him. We heard our brother speak again, but this time it spoke to use twice, but from different directions in front of us. Levi, why did you not help me in the village? Hurry, I don't have much time. My brother Levi ran off to the left and motioned with his arm pointing for me to follow the other sound to the front right from our location. I nodded and readied my sword. After we had split up, I started to have a feeling of dread, and airy feeling was washing over me. This felt off, none of this seemed right. The natives did not speak our language, and that voice did sound like our brother Nook, but it was off in a way too. Not soon after, that's when I heard the screaming. The screaming of Levi. Rushing back in the direction I saw him walk to, I hurried as fast as I could, no longer caring about keeping the silence as I ran and screamed out to him, trying to find his whereabouts. Further in the distance is when I saw it. I cannot even call it a man. It was some kind of forest creature. It was skinny like it was starting and shaped like a man from what I could muster. Its long arms clawed my friend, dragging his now lifeless body further into the dark woods. This creature had antlers on its head like some kind of deer. We have gods like this back home. Had they followed us here to this new land and now punishing us for becoming Christians? I was in total shock, but there was no choice in the matter, and I was losing sight of them in the dark now, and there was a good distance still between us. I ran as fast as I could, but even in doing so still could not keep up with this creature dragging Levi. I picked up his bow off the grass along the chai and ended up finding this cave on this hillside. I just knew that creature had taken my brother into that cave. There was nowhere else in eyesight where it could have gone and disappeared to. Once in the cave, I explored as much as I could after making a makeshift torch with some fabric from my clothing on a nearby stick I had found. The space was tight. I found the bloody drag marks right away, so my hunch was correct. Levi was brought somewhere inside this cave system. I had gotten lost a couple of times within this cave. It is more than meets the eye, but always seem to find my way back to the water source, as the constant dripping which echoes the labyrinth halls leads me back to here. I cannot leave him. I cannot leave my brother. I must avenge him and place his bow in his hand so that the Valkyries may take his soul to heaven or Valhalla to meet his family in paradise forevermore. Am writing this all down with the best of my knowledge in case I do not make it back out of this cave from which I ventured. Someone must know what happened to us. Someone must be led aware of this creature out in the woods. I hear my brother calling me now, far off, echoing off somewhere in this cave. I must end this log for now. If I return, I will update what I find. Goodbye for now. That was the last thing written in this journal. The rest of the pages were blank. Dude, wake up. I have to tell you something. Fourth story. This story was shared by u/Phillips612. I think I saw a Wendigo through the train window. It is as the title states. I am fairly certain that I saw a Wendigo out the window of the train. If that were the only event that happened, then I wouldn't have any reason to tell my story. In order to get into what happened, let me start off at the beginning of my day. It was a normal Saturday as far as I was concerned. I stayed up until about 3 a.m. playing the newest online mobile game with my brothers. Yes, I know, it is considered a sin to cheat by using my brother's screens to determine who the imposter is, but I'm not getting into that debate right now. I woke up not too long after 9 a.m., played on my phone a while and then hopped out of bed, threw on the same clothes I had on the day before and headed downstairs to the kitchen. I threw together my favorite breakfast food while my brothers both groggily dragged their feet to meet me. My twin brother, Gabe, decided to shower to wake himself up while my younger brother, Zach, decided to partake in the feast of homemade waffles with peanut butter and chocolate milk. By the time Gabe was dressed and sitting at the kitchen table, Zach and I had already finished putting the dishes into our dishwasher and cleaned off the table. I had packed in advance and my train wasn't for a few more hours, so my brothers and I had pulled our phones out and began terrorizing the servers of Among Us for a little while. After we grew tired from the online insults and cyberbullying that we received for cheating, we played some Mortal Kombat on our PS4. It was a very relaxing morning, all things considered. As I prepared to collect my luggage and leave for the train station, I reiterated the food plans to my siblings. The roast is in the slow cooker, all you'll have to do is clean up. It is going to be finished at 6 today, and if you aren't sure if it's done then shoot me a picture. I continued speaking over my Gabe's attempts of assuring me that they'd be fine without me. Remember, tomorrow is oven-baked chicken fingers and fries, after school Monday is burgers, and you can order anything you want for Tuesday, and pay a tip. I rushed my sentence as Gabe held the front door of our tiny rented house open for me. Chrissy, we'll be fine, okay? Chill out, okay? Gabe chuckled to himself. You're right, you'll be fine. Do your homework. I love you guys. See you Wednesday. I called to them as I headed down the paved driveway and towards the bus stop down the road. Hasta la vista, baby. As Zach yelled my favorite movie reference of all time at me, I couldn't help but smile. They'll be fine. I raised them well, I thought to myself. I looked at them waving in the open front door and gave them a very flat and stern expression. I'll be back. I deepened my voice as best as possible before smiling and heading back towards the bus stop. My parents were extremely busy people all our lives. Gabe was born with a learning disability and required more attention from my parents than I needed. I had to grow up and mature faster to be able to take care of Gabe, as our mother was a full-time principal in our local school and a part-time student tutor, while my father worked as a warehouse manager full-time and was often working the midnight shifts. He worked those shifts due to the employees' reputations to be unproductive. He always said he needed to straighten them out. My father would sleep all day and my mother would work all day. I would always prepare Gabe's lunches and walk him to school, walk him home and make him dinner. I helped him with his homework. I read him bedtime stories. I tucked him into bed. I was always there for him. Zach was born a week before my 9th birthday with Gabe. By now Gabe had quickly matured, surprising everyone. He was potentially even smarter and more socially acceptable than I was, though he didn't have the same parenting skills that I had developed and therefore wasn't entirely confident in even turning on an oven or setting a microwave timer. Anyways, by the time Zach came around I was well aware that I'd have to raise him too. I so desperately wanted my mom and dad to be real parents for little Zach, to be there for him and be what Gabe and I never had. But I knew deep down inside that that wouldn't happen. By the time Gabe and I were 18 and Zach had just turned 9, the three of us moved out and into our own apartment. I wasn't even sure that our parents would notice Zach's absence, to be honest. They had no issues with us all moving in together. They said to me themselves that they knew Zach was better off with us than them. They said he was never supposed to be, which entirely angered me. Because of this, Gabe and I started to call Zach our miracle brother. Despite our age gap, the three of us were extremely close with one another. It was us three against the world. Nobody would change that. Then about a year ago, I fell in love with my old high school crush. His name is Brian. We were always close friends since grade 9, but as high school came to a close and we parted ways for university, we confessed our love. It was a very corny movie moment to me. Even through long distance we made our relationship work. Gabe and Zach were obviously jealous that Brian was taking all of my attention. They were afraid that Brian was going to take me away from them. All that aside, they liked my boyfriend. They were all friendly and had good laughs together. They were happy for us. So here I am, at the train station awaiting my train to my boyfriend on our first-year anniversary. I anxiously awaited the train, wondering with me when I got back. Maybe they were mad already. Or maybe they aren't upset at all. I talked myself into thinking that I was doing the right thing, even though my stomach was turning violently. I was feeling very nauseous. It had nothing to do with anything I ate. I had a horrible feeling. Something inside me was telling me that something bad was going to happen. I didn't listen to it at the time. I thought it was all just the nerves of traveling. I was just too excited to see Brian. The train was quite long. It went from my small little town of southern Ontario to the northern and frigid climate that is stereotypically portrayed as all of Canada. Overall, the trip to Brian's apartments was close to 12 hours. However, that includes the train ride along with the bus and the drive that Brian has to take from his apartment to where I arrive on the train and back to his apartment. I had boarded the train and been seated when one of the train staff members asked to scan my ticket. I quickly apologized for not being prepared and dug through my luggage to find my ticket. After ensuring that I was settled and asking if I had wanted any food or drink for the ride, the staff member had moved along down the aisle. I looked around the car, noticing only 3 other passengers before pulling out my laptop from my bag and popping my headphones into my ears. I sent a text to my parents informing them of my absence from my hometown for the next few days and threw on some YouTube. Gaming channels were always a favorite, but recently Gabe had gotten me hooked onto a game theory channel. I could sit there for hours watching the different conspiracy theories about video game lore, and for the first half of my trip, that's exactly what I did. The early winter sunset filled the skies with orange and pink highlights as I had decided to put my laptop away and watch the window with my music playlist on. I had always enjoyed listening to music on long trips, especially across the country. I tried to imagine cheesy movie scenes taking place in the open fields with slow songs playing and faceless couples slow dancing. Within about an hour after I first peered out my window, the snow had begun. At first it was a light flurry, hardly visible as the train sped along the tracks. Eventually it was blizzarding. Simply looking outside gave me chills, as I never enjoyed being in the snow. Snow is pretty, but from afar, I'd always say. I shivered underneath my thick leather jacket as the train came to a slow stop in a remote northern town. This was not my stop, as the train station itself was visibly the largest building in the entire town. Anyone could stand on one end of the town and see the other side down the road, even in the blizzard-like conditions that were present. As the train waited, I kept my eyes focused outside my window. No passengers had left the car and no additional passengers had boarded. I found this to be very strange, as the train needed to always stay on schedule. Little time was available for simply stopping. There must have been something wrong with one of the employees or the conductor or possibly even the train itself. Attention passengers, we apologize for the delay. We will continue on our trip in 5 minutes. Once again, we apologize for the delay. We thank you for choosing to ride with us and enjoy your evening. The overhead speakers broke through my thoughts and pulled me back into reality. I simply looked around the car for a moment and then texted Brian to let him know of the 5-minute delay. When I looked back outside my window again was when I saw it. The tall figure was hunched over and with its back towards me. I could see the back of its white skull and its antlers broken and distorted. It was extremely frail, its limbs impossibly long and spindly. The creature was in the tree line across the town. Hardly any specific details were noticeably through the extreme snow, however I recognized right away the creature. Doubt had settled in almost as fast as the creature seemed to appear. Has it always been there? Was my mind playing tricks on me? It became more and more obvious the longer I gawked at it. How had I not noticed it until now? What the hell? I whispered under my breath. At the moment I was so quiet that I wasn't even sure I had said it out loud. Just as soon as I questioned, the creature whirled its head at a near 180-degree angle to face me. The black pits for eyes stared deep into my soul. This creature had heard me, and now this creature had seen me. I was sure of it. Its mouth unhinged and an animal's corpse fell out, blood spilling everywhere. Whatever this creature had been consuming was too mangled to determine what it really was. The train jolted to life and crawled across the tracks, gradually gaining speed. I was startled from the sudden movement and jumped nearly out of my seat. The creature only stared as I sped off. I scrambled to get my laptop out of my bag and reconnect it to the train's Wi-Fi. I spent the last 2.5 hours of my trip researching the creature. This is where I had learned of its name, Wendigo. This creature had been a part of native folklore for many generations. I nearly couldn't hold my dinner in when I read about the stories of cannibals becoming Wendigos hundreds of years ago. After reading other people's close encounters online, I was more and more convinced that what I saw was real. I was ready to move on and forget about my encounter with the Wendigo by the time I stepped off the train. I practically fell into Brian's arms and broke down, a mixture of fear and emotions of sadness and loneliness overtaking me all at once. I was grateful to be there with him, in his arms when I needed him most. I told him about my encounter with the cryptid on the drive back to his apartment. I believe that you definitely saw something, he began, his doubt unintentionally present in his voice. I just don't believe that a creature like that exists is all. Like, how come the only solid proof of its existence are tall tales and folklore? I dunno, Brian. I quietly looked to my feet. He reached one of his hands off the wheel and held mine firmly and reassuringly. I don't know what it is, I guess. It feels real to me. Well, that's good enough for me, he said calmly. That's enough reason for me to keep you safe. His classic cute grin formed on his face, revealing only a few of his nearly perfect white teeth. Oh. You need a reason to keep me safe? I jokingly said, as if he had said something offensive. Well, no, He stumbled over his words. Who? I made it comically clear that I was not believing him. Brian had managed to make me forget all about my terrible experience hours ago. We were laughing and joking around as he pulled into his parking space in his apartment complex. The building itself hadn't been very tall, only about 10 stories. The building itself was nearly completely surrounded by dark Canadian woods. His town wasn't very large, only about 8,000 residents. Beautiful lush evergreen forests surrounded the little city, with nearly every house having its own tree in the front lawn. Sparkling white snowflakes gently fell around me as I stepped out of Brian's car. The parking lot was lightly covered in snow before I had managed to make it to the entrance of the building. Brian, like the gentleman he is, carried my luggage from the car and to the apartment. He was talking about one of the regular customers at his fast food part-time job when I cut him off. "Listen," I said in a hushed whisper. The hairs on my arms stood on end. Goosebumps formed all over my body. Someone was watching us, I could feel it. I scanned the tree line, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. "I don't hear anything, Chris." "Exactly. It's so quiet." There weren't any noises around. Not a single sound. Only the eerie dead silence. "Is it always this quiet? In the middle of the night?" "Yeah, it is." Brian wasn't making me feel any better. "What's wrong, Chrissy? You still spooked? Let's just go inside." "I don't like it out here." I clung onto his arm and rushed towards the front doors. Once inside and in the elevator, I told him what I read online. I explained that the absence of any natural noises or wild animals typically means there's a predator around. With his apartment complex close to some dark woods, I wasn't very calm. I also told him how I felt that we were being watched from something in the woods. "Babe, your nerves are probably just shot." He held me close to him, trying to calm me down. "I promise you're safe here. It's gone. I promise." He drifted off. That night I dreamed that the creature had followed us. I saw from its point of view as it followed our car towards Brian's apartment. I saw as it watched us get out from the car and head inside. And I saw as it crawled into bed behind me, holding me in place. "Don't move," it hissed, its hot breath on my ear. I woke up in a cold sweat. Brian was sound asleep beside me, looking peaceful as ever. I went to the kitchen and got myself a glass of water. I put on my warm fuzzy housecoat over top of my pajamas and stood outside on the balcony. Some fresh air would do me good, I thought to myself. It was 3:20 in the morning and there I was on the balcony of the 7th floor, contemplating a cigarette. I wanted to quit ever since I had taken ownership of my brothers, but on that balcony I felt as though I had so desperately needed one. Feeling ashamed of myself for even considering one, I threw the only cigarette I had off the balcony. I needed to get a hold of myself before I returned home. I couldn't let Zach see me like this. Gabe would scold me if he were here, I thought. Wiping tears off my face, I looked around the tree line. I was just starting to regain my composure when I noticed something out of place. In the tree line was the deer skull. The horrid creature's body was undoubtedly attached to it. It just stared at me. I whirled around and nearly dove inside Brian's apartment. I slammed the balcony glass door shut and locked it. As I headed to make sure the front door was locked, Brian intercepted me, forcing a scream out of me. What's the matter, Christina?" Brian held me by my arms. I wouldn't stop wailing. All that I could get out was, "It's following me," in between the sobs. He held me in a close hug until I was calm enough to explain my nightmare and about the creature I saw mere moments ago. "Stay here," he said as he headed towards the balcony and took a look outside. I watched as he unlocked the door and stepped onto the balcony. A chill went down my spine, but not because of the wintry night air flowing into the apartment. Brian just stood there, staring at one spot. After a long pause, he slowly backed into the apartment, not taking his eyes off the creature outside. I knew he saw it. I knew he believed me. I could see it in his face. His eyes wide with fear, his mouth only slightly ajar. Without looking at me, he said, "The parking lot is in the back of the complex. Get your things. We can't stay here." "Are you crazy? That thing is outside. It's following me." I nearly yelled, panic setting in. I felt as though I was going to vomit. That thing. It told me. Brian was in terror. I don't know how, but it told me that it was going to come inside. I gasped, tears streaming down my face. "We have to go," he urged. I grabbed his hand and he grabbed his keys and we rushed out the front door. We ran to the elevator and rapidly hit the down button. I decided that taking the stairs was faster and bolted through the door towards the stairs, Brian following right behind me. Reaching the stairwell, I looked to the bottom before descending the stairs. About halfway down the first flight, I heard heavy tapping coming from the bottom. I leaned over the banister and saw the undead deer creature making its way up the stairs. Brian nearly bumped into me as I spun around and sprinted up the stairs crying and screaming. He followed my lead without question as I headed towards the elevator, doors just beginning to open. We both cramped ourselves into the elevator and Brian rapidly pushed the ground floor button. Just as the double doors slowly closed, we saw the stairwell doorway open and the animal's snout making its way towards us. We held each other, Brian verbally praying and me regretting most of my past life's choices. Ground floor and parking, the elevator dinged, cueing us to make our hasty escape. We ran like our lives depended on it, because in those long moments, they did. On our way to Brian's car, I slipped and fell into the snow. Brian, who was ahead of me, turned around and prepared to help me up. "No, go. Start the car. Go." I yelled frantically as I slowly made my way to my feet. He spun around and ran towards the car again. I took one step forward and fell to my knees, pain pulsing through my ankle. I loudly groaned in pain, clenching my teeth. I managed to get to my feet and half-limp half-jog to the car. Just as I closed the passenger door, the front doors of the apartment complex were violently torn from their hinges. The creature held nothing back as it sprinted on all fours towards the car. "Hang on." Brian shifted the car into drive and floored it. Normally the wintry road conditions would have evoked anxiety in me, but right now I felt as though Brian wasn't driving fast enough. I kept my eyes glued to the rear view mirror, watching the creature gallop towards us, its skinny form seemingly moving in unnatural angles with each step. "Are you all right?" Brian asked of deep concern, his eyes trained on the road ahead. "I think that I broke my ankle," I managed to get out in between breaths. He cursed under his breath. I don't think we can get you to a hospital with that thing on our asses, Brian thought out loud. Did you bring your phone? I asked him. I'm going to call the police. Damn it, no, I left mine at the apartment, Brian said plainly. I quietly sobbed as I too had left my phone in the rush. We are going to die tonight, aren't we? I said out loud, not wanting an answer. No, babe, don't say that. Things are going to be fine, we'll make it out of this. Will we? Will we actually, Brian? I yelled at him. Tears streaming down his face too. He was terrified, just like me, and yet, he was trying to protect me and keep me calm. I stumbled an apology in between sobs, but Brian cut me off. It's gone. He slowed the car to a stop and looked all around. Where did it go? It's gone, where did it go? I too began to look around, unease settling in. I'm not sure what was more horrific, seeing the creature pursue us or not being able to see it but feel that it was still there. We sat there in the car for a long while, just looking around desperately. In the distance down the road, I noticed headlights. I pointed them out to Brian and he flashed his high beams off and on. The car pulled over to the side of the road and Brian got out to talk to the driver. I bit my lip, not enjoying the idea of Brian getting out of the car. Please, call the police, we need an ambulance too, I heard Brian talk to the driver. Just as Brian made his way back to the car, the creature came out of the darkness and took him in its grasp. It happened so quickly. He was just gone, only a few drops of blood on the ground to prove that he was even there. The man in his car across the road screamed and sped off. I sat there, stunned and no doubt in shock. The monster rammed into my passenger side door head first, breaking me from my trance. It broke through the window and shoved its face towards me. I struggled against my seatbelt and repeatedly kicked it in its hollow skull. It caught my leg in its mouth and clamped its jaws down hard. I screamed from the pain, blood pooling around my wounds. I heard the horrific sound of my leg being bitten through as the beast crunched through bone. All I could do was scream. Biting down on my other leg, it pulled me through the window. I screamed for my life, but it was no use. With ease it had flung me face first into a nearby tree and everything went black instantly. My entire body seared with pain as blurry images of men and women in police uniforms and rescue uniforms loaded me onto a bed and into an ambulance. I was drifting in and out of consciousness. When I had finally come to full consciousness, I was in a hospital bed and hooked up to countless pieces of machinery. I had a feeding tube and an oxygen tube in me, my arm had an 4 in it, heartbeat monitors attached to my chest. The nurse reading my file gasped when she saw me awake and rushed out of the room. The PA system announced several doctors to where I assumed I was located. Within minutes the doctors were unhooking the feeding tube and oxygen tube, as I had no longer needed them. We expected you to be in a coma for at least another month, one of the doctors explained to me after the tubes were removed. Another month? I asked before clearing my throat. It still felt as though I had those plastic tubes shoved down my throat. You were out for 6 weeks. You were in a very brutal car accident. While waiting for the emergency vehicles to arrive, you were attacked by an animal. It was a very horrible scene. I blankly stared at him. Don't you remember, Christine? He cocked his head to the side and gave me a quizzical look. It's Christina, I corrected him. And no, I don't, I lied. I laid there for hours remembering the horrible nightmare that happened to me nearly 2 months ago. My whole body ached and pulsed with pain. I could hardly move. I thought about Brian for the longest time. I assumed he had to be dead, but he had shown up later that night. I came as soon as I heard that you were awake, he told me as he leaned over and kissed my forehead. After the creature had attacked me, it went for you. I watched as it threw you against the tree. I tried to pull it off you, but it threw me away. It told me that it wanted you. It told me that you saw something that you weren't supposed to see. Brian explained. By the time the police and ambulances showed up, the creature had already left. I never saw it leave, it was just somehow gone. I rode with you in the back, the officers recorded it as a bear attack. They didn't believe my story. Brian went on to say that he was administered into the hospital for a day with only flesh wounds and stitches. He said that he and my brothers and parents visited me nearly every day or so. My parents came. I asked, stunned. He nodded, giving me a half smile. In fact, they gave me a call on my way here. They're headed up with your brothers. They said that they'll try to get here before breakfast. When they got the call that you were awake, they pretty much dropped what they were doing and hopped in the car. I teared up and smiled. What did you tell them about what happened? The police told them what they thought happened. I went with it because I want them to like me. I giggled. Then I struggled to sit up. Brian rushed over to give help and sit me up. I reached down to scratch my leg, but I couldn't quite find the spot. Hey hun, can you help me? I've got an itch and I can't reach it, I'm too sore to be reaching down. I looked at Brian and he smiled back at me. Sure babe, whereabouts? My left leg, just below the kneecap. Brian went pale suddenly. What's wrong? I removed the blankets as a wave of adrenaline washed over me. Both of my legs were gone from just above the knees. I was still coping with my new handicap when my younger brothers, accompanied by my parents, rushed into the room and nearly knocked the wind out of me in a big hug each. Guys, I'm okay. I'm alright. I laughed a little out loud from pure happiness. They said you might not wake up, Zach sobbed as he held me close. They were talking to Mom and Dad about having to pull the plug on you. Gabe said grimly. Aw, guys. Doctors aren't always right. Look. I'm fine. Then I looked to my parents, both of them clearly holding back tears. We love you so much, Christina. Don't you ever go thinking otherwise. My mom's voice on the verge of breaking. Come back and live with us, okay? You'll be needing someone to look after you. My father chimed in. I'll have Gabe dash, I started. We've moved back in with Mom and Dad. Gabe said, giving me a warm smile. I looked over to Brian, who gave me a, you should listen to them look with a smile to top it off. I'll come back home. When they let me out of here, I couldn't finish. I cried of happiness. My parents loved me after all. My parents embraced me in a hug each and my dad stepped out of the room to talk to one of the nurses. How was the drive up? I asked my mom, wiping a tear from my face. Oh, not too bad, The first few hours there was a little snow, but once we passed through Oshawa, Toronto area, it wasn't too bad. Oh nice, I trailed off. Oh. Chrissy. Zach grew excited. I saw something really cool on the drive up. Oh, that's right. Go on, tell your sister, my mom encouraged. It was a bear-looking creature, but it was wearing this animal skull. I think it was a deer's skull. And the bear looked real skinny and tall. Isn't that something? My mom looked at me. I just looked to Brian. I knew I was probably as pale as he was in that moment. I didn't see anything. Gabe stated matter-of-factly. I ignored him. Yeah, it was freaky, Gabe missed it. I saw it too. I don't think your father saw it. My mother's voice grew distant as I stared at Brian. Are you okay? You don't look so good, someone asked me, but I wasn't sure who. Maybe you all should go home early. I'll bring Chrissy back down when she's out of the hospital. Brian said. You all have lives to get back to. Oh Brian. That's so sweet of you, but we'll pass. We've got a hotel room nearby and we took the boys off school. My mom said in her fake cheery voice. Mom, I stated in the most serious tone I could muster up. Listen to me very carefully. You have seen something that you weren't meant to see. That thing. It's on its way right now, I teared up. It's coming to find you. And little Zachy. Fifth story. This story was shared by you/Ghostskin5000. I am a psychologist. My patient has Wendigo psychosis. John had been my patient for months. I couldn't label him using official DSM codes. But he appeared to have what is known as Wendigo psychosis. At the time of my initial assessment, there wasn't any direct evidence that he tasted human flesh, although I could tell it was a significant preoccupation with him, and suspected him in the creation of several recent grisly scenes. Just admiring the artwork in your office, John said to me one day. He grinned, letting me see the teeth he filed down to fine points. So much red. I wonder if we're alike, you and I. I swallowed nervously. I couldn't report his Wendigo psychosis to the authorities though, because I would be perceived to be just as crazy as him. I couldn't even say he's a cannibal, even though he's come out and said his greatest fantasy is to devour a person over the course of 3 days. There was no proof. So much red, John repeated. Like a sea of blood making its way to your kitchen table. He grinned again, seeming even more unstable. This has to stop, John. Right now, there's no direct evidence linking you to the murders, but if you keep eating people, your actions will eventually catch up to you. You haven't reported me yet. No evidence. No, I think it's because you like me. Deep down, you like me, David Morrison. Why? Why the hell would I like someone like you? I can't prove it, but I know you are a murderer. Not just that, a monster. John put a hand admiringly to his heart. You really think that about me? Yes, I do. I'd like to talk about your parents, John. My session with him ended a few minutes later, and I drove to the park, taking in the beauty of summer before heading home. My wife had gone on a business trip, so I had the place to myself. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. I popped on the TV. Hannibal was on, but I stopped myself from changing the channel. For some reason, I had become intrigued by monsters. For some reason, I shook my head. The reason was clear. John. I put dinner in the oven, a chicken stuffed with carrots and onions. While that cooked, I decided to go into the basement, do some late spring cleaning. Turning on the light, I surveyed the pile of unruly boxes. A few cocoons struggled as they hung from the ceiling. Their inner cores were human, weak from neuroses or traumatic life events to the extent that they were willing to visit a lonely psychologist's house for free therapy. "You're happier this way," I said. "And you called me a monster," John replied for the cocoon of silk. I turned around, greeting John's sharp teeth and blood-red eyes. He looked like a droopy-eyed hunting dog. "Did you come to eat me, John?" John hesitated, then shook his head. "No. I'm here to learn from you. From the Master. You've obviously found a perfect way to ensnare your victims. Teach me." So I showed John how I spun a spider's web from my own hands. I was afraid he would eat me at first, and even though he stared at me with those hungry, blood-red eyes, he left with a cocoon of silk over his left shoulder. The Wendigo told me later that he could give me the hunger, the fire in my gut which would illuminate the path of my soul. I asked who had sent him. He told me John did, because he was so very grateful for the bundle of human flesh I gave him. "A gift for a gift," the Wendigo said, disappearing into the basement gloom and leaving me alone with my thoughts. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to our channel Horror in Detail. Drop your opinions/suggestions in the comments section, and like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm.